Welcome everyone. Today's webinar is on the experience of navigating the research commercialisation journey. And we're going to be hearing from 4 researchers who have done just that. I'm Alison Gray and I'm going to be your host today. And just while we're waiting for people to join us, would you mind just sharing in the chat box, just, you know, as it's coming up to the summer break, this is our last webinar before the summer break. So just share your holiday plans. Are you going to get a chance to get away somewhere? Maybe you already are. So please share in the chat box your holiday plans. Just interested to hear where are you off to over the summer? Hi, Karen. Oh, France, nice, on Saturday. That is very exciting. That's really soon. Brilliant. Where else are we going? I'm just wanting jealousy-inducing messages to come up. Where are you all off to over the summer? Any interesting trips? Nice, Helene. France, twice. Oh, sounds amazing. Greek islands, Sri Lanka. Wow, that's further afield. Stuck in Germany. Oh, that sounds great to me. But yeah, sunny. Budapest already, maybe a bit of Italy. Yeah, I'm hoping to go to Spain. I also have an exciting trip to Carlisle planned. I don't know if that counts, but yeah. Okay, brilliant. Any other holidays planned? I'd love to hear it. Please do jot into the chat box. All right, Lubo, Scandinavia. Oh, you're in Mumbai at the moment, Deepak. Fab. All right, that sounds really, it's some really lovely. I'm now just getting jealous about all these lovely holidays you've got planned. So, fab. All right. Well, before you go off on your holidays, we've still got things to think about. And my plan today is to provide you with some insights that you'll be able to learn from. And yes, of course, this is a webinar, but I always really value interactivity. So I'm really keen to get you involved by sharing either your experience and knowledge in the chat box. Maybe you want to respond to something that someone said. Or if you've got any questions, please do bop those into the chat box for our panel of guest speakers. I've got a million questions, but I've had to squeeze down to just a few, but I'd love to hear what you'd be interested to learn from them. Okay, so I think we've gathered a bit of pace now. We've got most of us here probably, so please just drop into the chat box to say hello and just share what university or organisation you're with. It's always really interesting to get a sense of the breadth of universities that are represented here today. So please do share where you're from. Hi, June and Bath, Eliane, Hull, Cranfield, Northampton. That's great. What a nice mix. We're all over the country. We've got Edinburgh, we've got Leeds, Salford, more from Northampton. That's really nice. Great to have you here from Northampton. More from Salford too. Fab. All right, brilliant. Good to hear from you all. So today's webinar is all about the navigating that research commercialisation journey, and we're delighted to have you here today to hear from our guest panel. Let me just introduce myself. I'm Alison Gray. I'm the founder and director of Skillfluence, and my background is in programme design around collaboration and commercialisation, and I spend a lot of time speaking with universities and researchers to understand the challenges that they have around knowledge exchange, around collaboration and commercialisation. Now, I started Skillfluence nearly 10 years ago to work with researchers and academics with the aim of helping them find routes to getting their research out into the world and to have real world impact and to make a difference with their research. And since then, we've worked with a lot of universities and research centres, more than 80 across the UK and Europe, and providing training to more than 30,000 PhD students and researchers and academics and professional services staff. And you maybe already know that about Skillfluence if you've come across us before, but what you might not know is that we also do a lot of work with startups and with spinouts. So you're probably less familiar with our work over the last 10 years with spinouts and startup companies, because Skillfluence also builds accelerators for spinouts and startups for entrepreneurs and founders. In the last 10 years, we've designed and delivered more than 65 accelerator programs to well over 1,250 entrepreneurs, and that's led to some fantastic funding and investment outcomes, well over 120 million funding secured that we know of, because over 10 years it's hard to track everything. So we've run sector-specific programs such as Innovation Biocamp and decarbonisation and tech-focused accelerators. And we also run a lot of accelerators for underrepresented groups, and in particular for female founders. We run a lot of workshops and accelerator programs for female founders. So that's a bit of context about us. And today's webinar is really focusing in on navigating that research commercialisation journey for academic founders. So we're going to hear from 4 of them, their journey from academic research to commercial application, and what support was available to them, any of the challenges or gaps that they maybe spotted that they then had to overcome. And they're going to share some tips and ideas for professional service staff, what worked really well for them, and where there were gaps and where they might be able to get some additional support. So with that in mind, I'm really delighted to introduce our panel. I'll just give them a moment to switch on their videos and mics. We've got 4 brilliant guests. There they are, appearing as if by magic. Love it. Thank you. I wish I could do a reveal like that in person. It's like draw back the curtain. So fantastic to have you here. Really excited for this conversation because I've spoken to all of you before, and it's just really interesting journeys. So I'm going to start by just asking each of you to introduce yourselves and give a quick overview of your experience. So Omar, please let me come to you to introduce yourself and maybe just give that overview of where you're at in your commercialisation journey.
Hi everyone. Sorry in advance if you hear a dog barking, but we'll try and get on with it. So I'm Omar. I formerly was an academic at the University of Liverpool. I did my undergraduate, my master's, my postgraduate, and my research coordinator position all at the University of Liverpool. So that's kind of my pedigree there. And whilst I was there, formerly as part of the Department of Chemistry and Material Science, we decided to spin out a company based on a research that we did as part of a large European grant. That spin out is called Apollo. And what we do is we help researchers in the material science space find their materials very rapidly. And where we're at is post-grant, we are sort of at a stage where we're just about ready to start selling an early version of the software. And the spin-out was only formally registered a few months ago. And so we're very early stage. We formally pre-seed, pre-revenue, as investors like to call us. And so, yeah, that's where I am. I'm just transitioning out of my academic position into industry, but I have had in the past year and a half been interfacing with our TTOs and being on accelerator programs and things like that. So I've been learning sort of language as I go along. Yeah, so that's me.
Brilliant. Getting the lingo. That is definitely one of the things. All right, Maria, can I come to you next just to introduce yourself and share an overview of where you're at?
Hi, morning everyone, or afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Maria Cerezo Sanchez. I am the co-founder and chief executive officer of Neurobite Technologies. And like Omar, we're a spin-out, in our case from the University of Glasgow. We are in the process of spinning out. I have just finished my PhD in electrical and electronics engineer. So this spin-out is coming out of my research. And yeah, I specialized in implantable neural microelectronics. And what we do at Neurobite is developing advanced neural interfaces that dissolve once they have done their job, so that people don't have to go back to get another surgery to take all of these electrodes and implantable devices out. I'm very excited to be here and learn more about the other panelists and their journey as well, and from the TTOs and people here about their journeys.
Fantastic. Thank you, Maria. I think that is one of the exciting things, is hearing from others and learning from others as well. So yeah, thank you for that. Natalia, I'm going to come over to you next to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I'm Dr. Natalia Herrera Valencia, and I'm a quantum photonics researcher currently working at Heriot University. And after 8 years of research, I step out of the lab to drive the commercialization of cutting-edge quantum entanglement technology, which is what I did for my PhD, and you need to transform it into market-ready solutions. So our spin-out project Intertangle is very early stages. We are working to spin out from the university, and we're developing a scalable hardware that delivers the essential resources to build quantum networks. And so I think I'm pretty much the earliest in the journey from all of the speakers. And nice to meet you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's like you want folk that are kind of, you want that rate, you know, to get that range of experience. So that early point in the journey is really, really exciting, but quite a challenging time. So fantastic. And Lorenzo, coming to you to just introduce yourself and tell us where you're at. You're a wee bit further along.
Yeah, hi everyone. Lorenzo from Crover. We make robots that can swim through any type of bulk solids and powders, with a focus primarily on grain, large, loose amounts of grain, usually in the thousands of tons, in sheds and silos. Our robots move through the grain, and they take measurements like temperature, moisture, and CO2, as well as samples at depth, and also steer the grain, which helps maintain its quality. And can also be used in anything from minerals to chemical powders, any system really made of solid discrete particles that most interact through contact forces. Our journey started when I was doing a PhD at the University of Edinburgh, working in local effects in granular materials and the rheology of those. Was lucky enough to discover a bit of novel physics that makes it possible to move through these kind of materials, and then we started figuring out, you know, what does a device using that effect even look like, and we've been doing that since 2018. So it's been a relatively long journey, and now the robots are a lot more mature, and so we're kind of more on the kind of scale up path now. We just recently we set up offices in the US as well and in Southeast Asia. We're slowly kind of making some moves in some new markets as well. So yeah, happy to be here and kind of share what we've experienced, the ups and downs through the journey.
Amazing. Thank you, Lorenzo. I love the idea of mature robots as well. That's an appealing thought. And what's really fantastic when I hear all of you is see those pitches, you know, that communication of what you do is really, really honed beautifully. So you've obviously been working really hard to bring something that's complex to life for people and you know, make it easy for them to understand. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with a few questions. I'll ask the audience to please share any questions that you'd like to ask in the chat box. I'll keep a lookout, so if anything comes up. But I'm going to start, Natalia, I'm going to come to you first on this one, because I'm really interested to understand what got you started? What motivated you to explore commercializing your research in the first place? Was there a trigger point?
Yes, I think the trigger point was being at the end of like finishing my PhD and figuring out what's next, right? And you have a passion on one side and you really like what you're doing, but I think you maybe also be very overwhelmed or maybe just thinking, maybe research, is it for me? So no. And then it was a combination of just serendipity and being really tuned on to opportunities, talking to people about what we were doing, what I wanted, and opportunities coming in from my PIs thinking maybe we can start thinking of taking this to the next level, and me saying I can lead this. Let's do it. I want to do something different, but I want to continue working in this field that it passions me, but I just want to learn something new and have new challenges that inspire me. And that was a year and a half ago. So pretty much we were just started talking to the university saying what would it look like if we were to bring this technology to market, or, you know, to make it useful. And it's been pretty much the university leading me through this journey and making me an entrepreneurial lead of this.
Fantastic. So it sounds quite serendipitous in some ways. And yeah,
Yeah.
looking for
you know,
something. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to say, because many founders would be immediately very inspiring, saying, I really wanted to help people with this, because probably they're doing like bio or environmental stuff. And I mean, I work with quantum technologies. I obviously want to make the world better, but it wasn't like a click moment and saying, obviously, this is going to help billions of people. It was more of like, let's try to bring this outside to make it more useful and see if it's possible. And being kind of in the transition of I'm looking for a job. So that's also.
I love that. I love that honesty. Thank you, Natalia. Omar, I'll maybe come to you and just kind of hear from you. What was it for you that got you started, really?
Yeah, fairly similar, I suppose. I did my master's project with my professor, Alessandro Torrisi, at the time. And I did ask him, do you have a PhD or a position going after this? And at the time, he was like, no. So I started looking for jobs. But in that short space of time, as the king of grant writing that he is, he managed to win an EIC transition grant, which is about £2 million. And he said, actually, I do have a position for you. Something's just come up. Didn't give anything away at the time. I said, very interesting, because we did a master's. I was one of the only people to actually publish a paper during my master's in that year. And it was actually a really good paper, if I say so myself. And that's because we addressed a key bottleneck within the sort of materials discovery space. And formally, we target organic electronics. So organic being carbon-based electronics rather than your traditional silicon, gives path to all sorts of novel types of devices and the actual complement to the technology itself. And what we did was we discovered these materials that were never seen before for a given application in solar cells. And the paper was so well received that it was one of the leading forces behind actually winning that grant. And we said, okay, well, why don't we develop a platform to help researchers find those materials as quickly as we could? So the problem was immediately clear to me. I was working already sort of in that industry, with being introduced to it and realizing that the people do it very, very slowly. So the whole grant and the whole project was built around, we're going to create something here. We're going to build something here to really expedite this process. And as I was a sort of lead, was very lucky to be introduced that during the masters. I was like, oh, amazing. I was like, marrying academia and this subject that I love with the potential of actually going out into industry and being a co-founder and like being able to lead on this project in a commercial capacity was just really attractive to me. I didn't really want to go on a professorship track or anything like that anyway. The PhD was there to potentially go more in a technical field outside of academia. So it was just luck as well for me as well. And I was very glad to be able to sort of mix the two when most people don't.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it is that kind of, being excited about the possibilities rather than, nervous about it, I suppose, is an important point. Let me come to Lorenzo and just hear from you. Can you cast your mind back, Lorenzo? What was it that got you started?
Yeah, I think it's funny because, through the years, I've been to a lot of entrepreneurial events, and the most standard thing you hear is people saying, I always wanted to start a business, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, those kind of like serial entrepreneur types. And I was like quite the opposite. Like I never even thought of starting a business until, one day I was just lying in bed. I kind of woke up with this intuition, a bit inspired by a paper that I read the day before, where people were looking at the movement of sand lizards in sand, and observing that if you're just moving an object horizontally through granite materials, it kind of experiences a lift. And I was thinking, could there be a more efficient way to move something through that doesn't require drag? Because that was still a problem in that paper. So I had this intuition. I was like, what if circular flow could create a lift as well? And so I set up some experiments and some simulations, and to my surprise as well, they worked. There was also a horizontal component of motion and kind of more than what I predicted. But still at that point, I wasn't like, we got to start a business. I think I was quite fortunate to be at the University of Edinburgh, where they have a strong network of advisors for both students and staff in the commercialization journey. So I was connected with one of them, and he, very nicely started giving me like reading material. And he never said, we got to start a business, but it was just the kind of thing that like after some weeks looking through options and kind of reasoning about the next logical steps, I was just like, I guess that's the only way to do it. And the only way, like as the only person who understood the technology, I felt like if I didn't do it, other people wouldn't really know what to do with it. And so it just felt like the logical thing to do. And then, the rest is history.
That's brilliant. Yeah, it's like you don't want someone else to do it because, like, they wouldn't do it the way you would do it. I also really like that thing about lying in bed thinking about it. We talk about bed, bath, and bus. It's that kind of eureka moments where you're daydreaming and your mind's able to just kind of meander. So I love that. That's one of the things there. Let me come to you, Maria. Tell us about how you got started.
Yeah, mine is similar in a way that I wasn't one of those, like Lorenzo said, serial entrepreneurs that was born with this idea of, yes, I'm going to start a business one day. I just ended up in this path quite by chance because I was in the middle of my PhD, focused on my research and just very, very focused on academia. And it was one of my PIs that said, you have an eye for enterprise. And I just dismissed it. What are you talking about? No, wait. And he said, well, there's this accelerator program for neurotech, which is the space where I work in. Why don't you give it a go? Just see how it is. And I did it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I said, okay, maybe this could lead me somewhere, but I'm still in the middle of my PhD. No, it would be crazy to start a company in the final year of your PhD. And then 2 weeks later, I had registered the company. So in hindsight, yes, what has it been the craziest year of my life? For sure. But it's given me a lot of opportunities and development and growth in ways that I couldn't even imagine. And yeah, it was all by chance and just by, taking steps and, knowing the right people and getting opportunities in the space.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, like the pattern that comes through to me is not intentional, but that openness, and exploratory, from all of you, that kind of like just being open, sometimes a bit through necessity, because it's like you're looking for opportunity, but you are looking and you're open to doing different things. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear from all of you. So Omar, I'm going to come to you next to talk about how you chose between different commercialization routes. Was there different factors that influenced that, or was it just always obvious how it would go?
Yeah, so it wasn't obvious even when we started the project. The idea was that you would commercialize something, but the grant, so we kind of worked a lot according to how the grant was sort of set up at the beginning because they wanted you to do it that way. But it kind of left it up to you between your partners and your team how you wanted to commercialize. And so it wasn't immediately obvious. We thought, okay, there could be a company here. We had actually partners in Germany. We didn't know whether they would set something up or they would take it on themselves as already as a commercial entity, they could do something. And so it wasn't immediately obvious. But then, throughout the sort of process, I was introduced to things like the iCure program, which is the Innovate UK's commercialization of research, where it kind of leads you through, well, do you have an opportunity here to spin out a company, or is it more a licensing thing? At that point, whilst doing that program, we were thinking, oh, I think this is going to be a company. And in the end, it became clear that, yes, it should be a company, it's just who should do it and who should take it on board. But then I think the process was definitely helped along a lot by our TTO at the University of Liverpool, who have been very, very diligent in sort of changing how they do things in the past few years as well, according to some new guidelines and how things should be done. And key thing is actually interfacing and talking with investors and the market themselves, and doing their own sort of research alongside the academic as they progress to make sure what they're doing is correct. So for us, I would not have been able to register a company in 2 weeks. I asked the university, we're probably going to register a company. This was like 2 years ago. We've only just registered it. They said, look, slow down, slow down. Let's just see. Let's do everything. They recommended the iCure, all sorts of things, which in the end was a very good choice. And then we took it very, very slow and realized what's the opportunity, what is it that we're addressing, and getting the language right. Does the academic founder, aka me, does he have the right skills to sort of take it forward? Or if they don't, do we bring on a commercial driver to help support that and things like that? So they were very, very good, and without them, I think I would definitely have struggled. But yeah, definitely not obvious from the beginning. Even though the grant said you need to commercialize something, for us it was we needed that. We needed to learn a lot during it as well.
Yeah, interesting. Does anyone else want to come in that? Would anyone, Maria or Natalia or Lorenzo, anyone wanting to? You can just switch your mic off if you do.
Yeah, I can
Lorenzo?
jump in. Yeah, I have to say, I mean, in our case, like the University of Edinburgh was like very, very nice in the sense that they left all the IP with us. So we're technically a startup rather than a spin-out, even though, you know, it came out of my PhD research. And I mean, for those in the call that are not aware of this, like generally the way it works is universities have a standard policy that defines who owns the IP for PhD students. Edinburgh University at the time, I don't know if they still do, I think they probably do, but their standard policy was that students, whether it's master students or PhD students, by standard, they own the IP that they generate. And staff instead employed by the university, so usually postdocs or professors or lecturers, that IP usually is owned by the university, and they have a mechanism for commercialization, licensing, and so on. Being a PhD student, then it also depends on the scholarship that you have. So I was, again, lucky. I didn't know this when I signed up for the PhD, but like the EPSRC scholarship that I had, which is one of the kind of fairly standard EPSRC ones, it again, like kind of leaves the IP with the student unless the university has a different policy for it. So it tends to depend on the university that you're in. Some universities, they keep by standard all the IP from PhD students as well. I think another standard case that I've seen is if you have a Marie Curie scholarship, usually those, they force the IP to be with the university. So yeah, I think that's something to consider. It mainly kind of saved a lot of time and a lot of pain of going through the whole kind of, you know, IP licensing process, and also, you know, in terms of investment and other things we have to do afterwards, it just makes decision making a lot easier. But yeah, I know not all universities are like that, but that kind of really simplified our journey, and it also left us the freedom of, you know, proceed as we wanted, as we felt it was necessary. And the university was still very supportive, you know, giving us, you know, free grants and investing in us, you know, sometime after that.
That's fantastic. That leads quite nicely into my next question, really, which I might go to Natalia with, is what kind of support you received from your university or the professional services team within that, and what was most helpful there?
Yeah, so I'm continuing receiving constant support, and I'm going to say professionally and psychologically, because they're fantastic. In two main things. So first, I think that our technology office really understands the process to spinouts, to start scaling, and just preparing researchers from the beginning to start thinking about the idea, to really take all the final steps until you spin out, and then even connecting to the right people, so you will be able to succeed. So when we came into them, we had no idea really of what path to take, right? We were like, how do you do this? And pretty much they gave us like this whole structure of things that, like Omar mentioned, like, well, you have the convert challenge, and you have can go to ICURE, and ICURE has the discover, the explore, the engage. So, and I remember my TTO kind of had like an itinerary of like, well, you do the discover here, then you do the explore here, and when you do the explore, you go to Scottish Enterprise, which we're very lucky to have in Scotland, and then you do the OQ here, and you do the hopefully commercial company creation here, but at the same time, we're going to apply for maybe some grants for TRL, and definitely be looking at the Enterprise Fellowship from Royal Academy. So, you know, they kind of have like all of this, which can be sometimes overwhelming, but is really assuring that they know what they're doing. They know what you're never going to be saying, like, now what? There's very clear milestones, which I think is useful because we're still in the university, we're still having spun out, but you want to be sure that when you're actually out, you have every basis covered, right? Because that's the scary bit, right? Like every time in bed, I'm like, how am I, like when I actually don't receive a salary and it's all up to me, like, am I actually ready for this? So I think all of these structure the university gives and understands, and they have very good relationship with each of the institutions. They have have multiple groups already and projects and spin-outs that have gone through them. So I think that on that side that's very helpful. Just the order, and then on the other side is, I think I've had the chance to have an enterprise executive that is just really energetic and understanding, and sometimes he can be very demanding, but also really getting when I'm getting maybe too overwhelmed, or when I really need to focus and not do a lot of the commercial stuff, but I have to go to the lab. So that's why I was saying the psychological help in this, that they really go with the researchers, and they understand that sometimes we can be really hard because we never really planned to do this. I don't know. I mean, as I think we all said. So as researchers, when entering these spaces, they're so new. We're used to kind of knowing and always entering a room and know exactly what we're doing, and we're experts on it. And this is different. So I think on that side, the university has been both organizational, very clear, but then just understanding of what the experience and the journey is.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think that's so true about that kind of like you're so expert in what you know about, and then you're going into a new zone, so it's a different thing. I'd love to hear from Maria. Like, what's your, how has it been for you? What kind of support have you received from the university, and how's that worked for you?
Yeah, for me, coming out of my PhD, a lot of the support I was receiving was, like Natalia was mentioning, not just on the technical side of things, on how to set up a business and everything, but also on the psychological and emotional side of things, of, you can handle this. And it's something that, especially as a woman co-founder, sometimes we doubt ourselves and think that this is a world that's just led by men and there's no space for us, but we have a space and we need to make a space for ourselves. And just being able to speak to people that, like they put us in contact with people that have gone through the same path as us, and also be allowing us to coordinate in terms of grant applications. So for example, the one that Natalia was mentioning, the Royal Academy of Engineering Enterprise Fellowship, the TTO is one of the key pieces in that application process, because they have to submit their own separate application. And thanks to that, we got that fellowship. So it's been a tremendous amount of support, and I cannot underline and highlight how key TTOs are to startups and spin-outs. They just being able to reach out, and even just putting you in contact with someone in the space, someone that's a co-founder, a founder that has already gone through that path, can lead to then so many other connections and so many other opportunities. And those are truly invaluable, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. They're so well connected. It's amazing, and that kind of knowledge that they can share. So when it works so well. So I'm going to come over to Omar and maybe touch on that. But also, did you spot any gaps? Were there things where you're like, I wish I'd had help here at this point?
Yeah, so again, the university were very good in sort of identifying gaps and bringing someone on board to try and plug those gaps at least for a short amount of time. So that was very useful. But I think with the TTOs, they're still learning. I think they are still learning. I think I'm a case study for them to learn with, as they are learning as well. And it's I think it's sort of striking the balance of handhold, because you have probably a young entrepreneur who is totally new to the field, handhold, but don't backdoor manage, because then he gets into later conversations and it may appear bad, for especially when you get them in front of investors and things like that. And sort of have conversations potentially with the PIs as well beforehand, and tell them, this is how it works. Usually what happens is, from what I can see, is the young entrepreneur, a young researcher within a group maybe takes it forward, then that sort of necessarily places a PI in the back seat, which is okay for many, as they want to carry on being professors, but then think, actually, what does that look like on a cap table? And then you're expecting the young person to sort of have that conversation. You get on with it, but maybe be clear with that professor as well, and the PI, that this is how it works, and then try and go through the steps with them, because that professor doesn't know everything as well, and I think they just assume that they kind of go along with it. Luckily for my PI, he's very, very good. He's very accepting of all this. I was aware of all these things, but you can have friction there as well. So I think the TTOs have to be aware that there's things happening in the background within the group, as well, especially that that person is probably still working for the university in an academic position that they have other obligations to fill as well. So try and work with them to try and figure out, you know, how much can you spend your time doing this without conflicting with other obligations, especially with like academic obligations as well. And those academic obligations tend to be actually developing the business more. And so it's like, don't let that become totally, you know, back of the mind as well, because that's actually helping, you know, you can't totally drop being the like technical person, let's say, right? Even if you are going to go on to be a CEO, you have to wear 20 hats eventually. So being able to support people to do that is very difficult as well. And as well, yeah, it's other than the sort of seeing it from their perspective, being more involved, maybe, you know, finding something for as well, like the PI to do to help out as well. So, you know, you try and get the person who's taking the company forward to be the face of everything, which is good. I think it is very, very good. But maybe trying to leverage the PI's time as well to work towards it, because at the end of the day, as I mentioned with the cap table, a question that comes up is like, how is this person contributing going forward? So up until that point, the TTO doesn't really help the PI figure out what they can do to contribute going forwards, if that makes sense. So helping there as well. So a more a more holistic approach, let's say, to and seeing it from multiple angles.
Yeah, that's an important point, and that kind of idea of like, you know, you're not just an entrepreneur now, you're doing all the other stuff as well and trying to drive this forward. Lorenzo, let me come to you. What about yourself? Any kind of gaps that you've had to navigate that you think would be great to have different support there?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the university was very supportive in our case as well. I think there's like a pattern here where like Scottish universities are generally very, very supportive in the commercialization journey. So yeah, you know, in our case as well, they guided us through the various steps, that the connections, especially for the, you know, with the entities that we needed support from in the early stages. You know, I think Royal Academy of Engineering has been mentioned, Scottish Enterprise, Innovate UK, you know, they organize meetings for us with some of those bodies to kind of, you know, present the initial opportunity to them and to, you know, find relevant grants and other things. iCure, unfortunately, we weren't able to tap into as a startup. I would have liked to, but we were able to access other types of support like Smart Scotland grants and so on. I think the hardest thing in the early stages, depending on the complexity of what you're building, you know, if you're building a software product, you can totally do it on yourself, and you know, it's probably cheaper if you can do it on yourself. But in our case, we were trying to build, you know, an entirely new robot with a lot of you know, moving components like electrical, mechanical parts, you know, robotic software, a lot of technical challenges and things that we had to figure out along the way, and that required a lot of very technical expertise, which in turn requires a lot of people, and it requires money to be able to pay for those people. So in the early stages, if you are trying to build something complex, the hardest thing is really kind of finding the money to be able to put together that team and to be able to pay that team to build what you're envisioning. And I think that's probably, you know, been the thing that took us the longest time to really get to the point where we had enough funds to, you know, get at least to the minimum team. People talk a lot about a minimum viable product, but we really need a kind of minimum viable team to build what we needed to build. Yeah, you know, like advisors are great. You know, they can delineate a lot of times the right path. But then you need the money and the resources to actually put that plan in place, and you know, that's, you know, very scarce initially.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, I'm liking this idea of the minimum viable team. That's a really great way of putting it. We've actually got a great question from Matt Hicks, and he's asked about how the ownership worked when looking at founder equity, particularly with you being PhD students. Lorenzo, you've already mentioned that, but perhaps Maria, would you like to come in on that? Just how did that work for you?
Yes, thank you for your question, first of all. For us at the beginning, when I first started the company, it was 100% owned by me because I was a PhD student. But again, I knew that this was gonna be a spin out because of the fact that we needed access to facilities. Ours is not just a software like Lorenzo was mentioning. We still needed quite a lot of technical support and access to facilities that otherwise would not be possible without the support of the university. So at the University of Glasgow, their standard policy is that the maximum ownership for the university is 20%. That has significantly reduced from the past and is constantly getting updated. In negotiations, you can get it down to 10 or 5%. But again, it's just a matter of seeing what is put on the table, if it's dilutable, if it's non-dilutable, and then just seeing how you negotiate through that. And then there's the separate issue of the IP ownership. So in terms of IP, like we were mentioning before, when you're a PhD student at the University of Glasgow, you own your IP, and if you're a staff member, the university owns that IP. It gets a bit complicated when the IP is filed by the university on behalf of a student. So that is a tricky position to be in. Unfortunately, we were in that position, and it's something that is still in the process of negotiation. But I think having clear terms and a sort of standard policy is key, so that you have some cards on the table, some point to start, and then you can see how you can negotiate. But yeah, it depends on the university. That's the best answer I can give. Each university will have their own policy, and I think a couple of years ago there was a very big report by Bohurst that was published about how big equity stakes, big percentages owned by the universities, were de-incentivizing investors. And that report had a very significant impact, because then their universities started to reconsider their equity stakes and they've started reducing them. In the US, they typically don't own more than 5%. In the UK, still they own more. I would argue as a co-founder that they should own less to incentivize more investors to come in. But again, this is a hot topic of debate in the UK in spinouts, panorama and environment at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's a really, and it's lovely to get some of the facts and figures. I think that's really, really helpful there. So thank you for that, Maria. I'm gonna come round to you because I like this question. I'm going to go to Natalia first on this, but were there any misconceptions that you had when you were starting out in the commercialization journey? Was there, is there anything unexpected?
I think like a whole thing is constantly. I mean, the problem is, I think because I haven't started thinking only until when I started doing it. Maybe I just didn't know what I was going to. I guess you have this idea of like the serial entrepreneur, or like what TV shows, and you're like, that's not me, so you don't really know what you're going to be having. I think so in that case of like misconceptions, I think I didn't have any, so preconceptions. So when I moved, and I've been just launched into it. I think surprises, what I thought was going to be, what I never imagined was going to be more difficult is just maybe I thought maybe it was going to be communicating science to other people, or just trying to sell. But I think it was this new persona, or like new way of existing that I had to become now that I was not in the lab being a researcher, but now I had this completely different role. And I think that has been, that was the most surprising bit for me, and most surprising also how difficult I found that. Because I realized then that I was very stuck in my ways of maybe relating to other people, saying things. And when you change your language, when you change your focus, and when you change, when you want something from somebody else, or when they want something from you, those are things that you're not really used to in research. We're all very just straightforward. We're just sharing everything. I don't know. It's a very different environment. So I think that was the kind of my biggest surprise. Now, yeah, no, I've had misconceptions really. Maybe the misconception was that that I wasn't the right person to do it. I think that was the biggest lesson. Because when I put entrepreneur or something next to my name, I still get a bit like me. And it's because of this idea, and like Maria was saying, we also don't have like a lot of female entrepreneurs in tech. I think more now, which is really exciting, and I'm seeing it more in early stages, especially like here in Scotland. I end up having like an ecosystem of female founders in tech. But that's not what you see in an investor's room. That's not what you see when you're going to big conference or big tech events of the industry. So I think what I had to fight more of the misconception is that I was actually the right person to do it. Hopefully still, because haven't spun out, but I think so. So
well, that's good. That's how you sound more sure about it. It sounds like it's been
depends on the day.
Exactly. I mean, like when we were talking about it, you'd also talked about that kind of that mindset shift from researcher to entrepreneur, and just that's quite hard. You can learn the lessons of business language, and you're all smart. You'll pick how to do things up really quickly, but how that mindset shift is definitely an interesting one. Let me come over to Omar. Maybe you could feed into that. Any misconceptions that you perhaps had?
Yeah, I thought we could have probably gotten started a lot quicker because you don't realize how many barriers there are. Yeah, I thought it'd be a lot smoother. I think one thing was I was always sort of echoing what was already said, a little bit scared of going in and knowing that the language is going to change, knowing that you actually have to put up more of a personality and things like that. And none of the people in this call, but I know very many people who are in academia, they tend to be more reserved, more shy, and may really hate this sort of person-facing role. And to be honest, like I'm quite introverted myself, so that was something that I had to learn as well, and understand that, especially doing IQ, go and talk to 100 people. It's like, you just have to go up to people and you just have to talk to them. So you realize that going into it, this is the kind of role that you're asking for. So I knew that was always daunting. Didn't realize how daunting it was until I did it. But also, yeah, the main thing was just really underestimating the amount of work it goes into building a sort of business case, because you go as an academic, you're very blue sky about things, and then you can sort of, even though you're smart and you understand, don't make many assumptions, always think there are always many variables and many factors going on, but you always have that internal bias. Even when you're doing your science and you're publishing paper, you get that confirmation bias all the way through that, and you think this is good stuff, we are publishing, reviewers are liking it, which means that this is important. And then you go to the market and then there's a tone shift, and it's like, oh, it's not just about the science anymore. It's just, what value are you bringing? It's the benefit. You can build something amazing. It can be very fancy. And if nobody wants to buy it, then it is not useless, but it's useless. Right? So it's just understanding that actually, yeah, people, care about a totally different thing in this space, and you do need to learn that as well. So yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, well, that's fab. Thank you for that, Omar. So I'm going to come out. We're kind of we're beginning to run out of time. So a last couple of questions, and one of them is around what advice you'd give to professional services staff who want to better support researchers on their journey. And I think you've given lots of insights that will be really super helpful for that. But if there was some top tips from you, Lorenzo, maybe I'll come to you. Is there anything that you would say, that would be helpful for someone who is supporting a researcher on their journey?
Yeah, I think it ties with what the others were saying about unexpected aspects of the journey, really just realizing how long it takes, and maybe also kind of helping that the researchers understand really the commitment and the time and effort that it requires to get a business to a successful stage. Because I think we're all kind of fed a lot of media, both in the news and in movies, about these instantaneous success stories where you see someone get an idea and then the next day they're a billionaire making an exit on the stock exchange, or like living their best life like that. That's not really usually what happens. Like even in the ones that look like almost like instantaneous stories, there's years of effort behind that don't really get covered as much. And so I think that's important also because you want to make sure that you're really 100% committed to what you're starting, and that you see yourself kind of really changing your life and dedicating 100+% of yourself to it, at the very least for the next 10 years. If you don't see yourself doing that, and if you think, oh, it's something I'm going to try for a year, and I don't know if I'll still like it after that, like that, that's not probably gonna get you very far in business. So that's probably kind of the main advice I would have.
Whilst not frightening folk off at the thought of
no, I mean, it's a passion, because there's a good side to it as well. Like I think most of us that do it is because it's not a job. It's like, it's really your passion. It is what you want to do all the time. And it's a pleasure to focus on it, even though there's a lot of ups and downs, some of which are not as much fun, but it's really what you actually want to do. But if you're not sure that's really what you want to do, then that's where you maybe want to question things.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Maria, maybe come to you and get your input on that. What advice you might give to professional services staff who want to better research, support researchers on their journey?
Yeah, I think the main thing from my side that has helped is just reach out. A lot of, like we were mentioning, researchers and academics, we tend to be in our own little world and bubble, and we rarely come out of it. So to have the TTOs come speak to us and approach us and say, hey, have you thought about what you want to do with this technology? So that in our case, like, as much as I love academia, the main thing that drove me towards this path as well is the fact that I didn't want all of my research to just end up being papers that a couple of people will read, they will cite, and it's just this continuous cycle. But the technology doesn't reach, in our case, patients in need of that technology. So I wanted to break out of that. And in order to do that, I saw that the commercialization route was the path that made the most sense. But there are a lot of researchers with great ideas and with passion for what they do, but they don't know that there are different paths available, and they don't have to start a company if they don't want to. They could potentially license, but again, they just don't know that there are these options available to them. So essentially just, come speak to academics and researchers, especially PhD students. They rarely get to interact with TTOs unless we come to them. So just come to the different schools, the School of Chemistry, the School of Engineering, at the different universities, and just wander about and ask people, hey, what are you up to? What are you doing? What are you working on?
That's really great advice.
I think that would make the most difference. Just establish connections, because then they will know you. And if one day they want to maybe commercialize their research in one way or another, then they will come to you because they know you already.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think we've got a question from Maximilian, and I think that's starting to answer that question, and hopefully has given some insights through. We've very short time, but I'll just come to Omar and Natalia. Just a quick point on advice you would give to professional service staff. So Omar, maybe you first. Maybe one point.
Yeah, I mean, carry on with this trend of it seemingly getting better overall. It's, echoing what was said, talk to the academics a lot, make sure that you can speak to them, and you're asking them to be able to speak to certain types of people, make sure that you can speak to them and facilitate that, and sort of have a pipeline as well for them. So you're going to go at the beginning, talk to this academic and realize what stages. You're going to ask them to sort of learn how to do certain things that they might not have done in terms of commercialization, all the way to talking to investors who you might introduce them to. So understand that sort of pipeline of what you have to do to support them through that, getting them on programs like iCure, Commercially Curious, things like that. Always suggest that they go on things like that, and then just learn and just teach them as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. Brilliant. Fab. Thank you, Omar and Natalia.
Adapt. I think that's important. There's a lot of order or like structures that you want to maybe put all the projects into a mold of, and you're going to go do this and this and that, and this is how you engage with the market. because that's maybe what you've seen in biomedical or environmental sciences, and I've noticed that, well, because I'm in a very different field, this has been an issue, you know, and it has been like a slower process because we don't really fit in many of these processes. So I'm just kind of, you know, it's obviously it's harder because then you have to learn from different sectors, but just kind of be open to adapt each project to maybe a different mold, because not all the markets work the same, not all the projects work the same, not all the teams are the same, and yeah, it's just it will make things easier.
Fab. That's great. Some great advice there. So I really hope that's been helpful to everyone. Thank you so much to our speakers. I'm just going to pull together some key top tips and takeaways from our discussion there. So it kind of felt like there's no one way into commercialization. Some researchers are more intentional, but for many of you, the path found you, I think. You know, you need to be ready to adapt your strategy. It never really goes according to your initial thoughts. Shifting mindset to become a researcher that commercializes, well, that can take a bit of time. You can learn the tools, but that psychological shift, that takes a bit of time to embrace, I think, sometimes. Getting the right support from the university can be absolutely crucial. And, you know, you guys have done amazingly well. It sounds like you've had really fantastic support along the way, and that's accelerated your progress. But I'm guessing that the opposite can also be true, where there's not that support available. And then that kind of ensuring mutually beneficial relationships with the university and TTO. You've got to think about the goals of both parties. And we did start to touch a little bit on that. And then just that kind of final point there about just helping you make those connections with people and the supports. That can be so powerful. And the professional services teams, the TTOs, they've got the know-how and the networks that can really make the difference. And know that there's a path there that you might be able to follow is really helpful. So thank you ever so much to our speakers there. I'm just going to let you know about our next webinar. Well, I'm kind of not really, because we're taking a break over the summer. So we're going to be planning our schedule of webinar topics for the next few months. We like to keep them relevant and current. So if you've got any suggestions for future topics that you'd like to hear about, would be useful for you around the areas of our areas of expertise, which are things like knowledge exchange and impact. It's commercialization, collaboration, communication, training, engagement, research or development. Drop them into the chat box now, or please send me an email. My address will be coming up in the final slide. All ideas welcome, put them into the mix. We're really excited about our plan for after the summer, and we've got the date set, and you can register for the next one and then find out what it is. And this has been such a fantastic conversation today, especially good chat with all our speakers. It's been amazing. Thank you to our guest speakers, to all of you. Really appreciate you taking the time in sharing your stories and your experience. I actually just cannot wait to see where you get to. You know, I'm really wishing you all the very best of luck. I think it's super exciting, and it will be great to see what you can achieve. So thank you very much to everyone for joining the conversation today, for your engagement. And it's been great to hear the questions from you. I hope some ideas have been sparked today around commercialisation, and I look forward to seeing you all at the webinar in September. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.